In today's tutorial, we're going to continue our exploration into the project known as Spring AI. This is the project helping Java developers build intelligent applications with artificial intelligence. Now, if you missed my introduction, I'll go ahead and leave a link to that in the description below, as well as a card somewhere up here. In that introduction, we talked about some of the terms that we throw around in the artificial intelligence space, as well as getting started with Spring AI and Open AI. Now, Spring AI is just an abstraction on a top of a lot of these LLMs, so you can use whatever LLM that you want to work with. But as you get into building these applications, you start to realize that you have to deal with other challenges. Things like prompting, output parsing, embeddings, vector databases, and more. Today, I want to take a look at prompts. And to do so, we're going to dive through a couple slides so I can talk about the problem. And then we'll jump into our editor and start building a Spring AI application with prompts today. So here we are in my slide deck. I want to talk about this first. Prompts serve as the foundation for the language-based inputs that guide an AI model to produce specific outputs. For those of you familiar with ChatGPT, a prompt might seem merely like some text you put into a dialog box and that's sent to the AI API. However, it encompasses much more than that. In many AI models, the text for the prompt is not just a simple string, so that's important to remember. Now, there's a word that's thrown around, or a term that's thrown around, called prompt engineering, and I cringe a little bit when I hear it, but I'm going to kind of put my thoughts aside on that for a second because it is a very important subject when we talk about building AI applications. For me, this is just learning how to effectively communicate with the AI system. This is the input that is directing the AI model to produce the specific outputs that we're looking for. So if you don't get the output or something that you're kind of hoping it to produce, you can always adjust that by changing the prompt that we send to the AI. Model outputs are greatly influenced by the prompt style and wording. So again, being able to effectively communicate with the AI is very, very important, and probably the most important thing we have to do here. When it comes to prompt engineering, there are some techniques and effective prompts that you can share in the community. The really nice thing is some of the examples that we're going to look through today are things that we craft ourselves. Out in there in the ecosystem, there are entire collections of prompts that you can go ahead and copy and paste into your application. Somebody who's gone through the trouble of crafting a specific prompt to get a desired output. So go ahead and take a look out there for those. There are two links here, the OpenAI guidelines and the mini course for ChatGPT engineering that I will take a look at in a second. These are really nice resources to kind of start learning how to effectively communicate with an AI. Now, prompts and Spring. So prompt management relies on a text template engine. We'll see that when we get into prompt templates, there's a way to craft a string and then have some type of dynamic variables or templates that we can go ahead and input later. You can think of this as analogous to the view in Spring MVC, right? When we are working in a controller, we may have a model, we may put in customer first name is Dan, customer last name is Vega, and we go ahead and send that model down to the view. In this case, our prompt is really the view to the AI. So here's an example of the prompt class. Again, we'll see this in a live coding example, but we have our prompt class here, and a prompt has a few different constructors. You'll notice that it doesn't just pass in a string, it actually creates a new user message. So we'll talk about user messages in a second. There are different roles when it comes to creating prompts. You will also see some of these constructors take a message, and again, user message is a specific type of message. If we go in and look at the implementations of this message, there are a few. Things like an assistant message, a chat message, a system message, and a user message. Some of these boil down to roles. What are the different roles? I'm not going to read all of these to you. You can kind of go through them. But a user role represents the user's input. What is the user asking? What is their question? What is their command? This role is fundamental as it forms the basis of the AI's response. Now, on top of that, we could have something called a system role. This really guides the AI's behavior and response style, setting parameters or rules for how an AI interprets and replies to the inputs. It's akin to providing instructions to the AI, before initiating that conversation that the user might have with the AI. We'll look at an example of this and why this really, putting all of these pieces to the puzzle really helps us get our desired output. Finally, we have some prompt templates here. This is an example of a prompt template. So we have a string message. So we have a message in there. We have some curly brackets with genre in there. And genre is what we'll kind of replace with whatever is passed into this particular method. So we'll see an example of that today. So that's my kind of spiel on prompts. And again, I hear a lot of people say, well, Spring AI is just an abstraction on top of calling the LLMs. And I want to make sure we understand that that's not just the case. Yes, it is a REST API call to a lot of these LLMs, but there are a lot of challenges that you're going to run into with kind of crafting these prompts and then getting the desired output to parse to some type of object in your system and more challenges. So what I'm trying to do with these videos is really kind of introduce you to Spring AI and the different components that you're working with. So with that, let's head over to start.spring.io, create a new application, and work with prompts. All right, so before we get in there, I just wanted to mention these two links that I shared in the slides. This is OpenAI's Prompt Engineering Guidelines. This is a really good read just again on effectively communicating, how to write clear instructions, how to provide reference text, splitting complex tasks into simpler tasks. Again, if all you've ever done is type into ChatGPT a string and ask it for something, these are really good tools to kind of hone in on that craft because it is very important. There's also a really good free short course from ChatGPT, Prompt Engineering for Developers. This is with Andrew Ng and an employee at OpenAI. This is just a really good course on going through learning how to effectively write these prompts. It is important and it's something that I think we should all work on. So those are two really good resources for starting with that. With that, let's create a new project. I'm going to use Maven. I'm going to use Spring Boot 3.2.4. Let's go ahead and call this dev.danvega. We'll call this prompts. And we'll use Java 21 today. And then I'm just going to go in and pick Spring Web, and I'm going to pick the AI LLM that I'm working with. In this case, it's OpenAI. So I'll go on down and select OpenAI. I will generate this and open this up in my favorite IDE, IntelliJ. You can open it up in whatever IDE or text editor you're most productive in. With that, let's write some code. We'll call this the simple prompt controller. And in this, I will go ahead and mark this as a REST controller. Now, again, if you didn't get a chance to watch the intro, maybe you can dive into that. I'll kind of quickly run over some of this stuff. But the first thing that we need is a chat client. There happens to be only one implementation of this right now because we're using OpenAI. So if we look at that, we can see there's an OpenAI chat client. And this is what's going to help us communicate with OpenAI. So I'm going to create a get mapping, and we'll call this, we'll just use this at the root. That is fine. And then we'll go ahead and say this is going to return a string. We'll call this simple. And if you were with us in the last video, we took a look at chat client. Chat client basically has two methods in there. One called call that takes in a string, and one called call that takes in a prompt. We used just the simple string last time, but you'll see underneath the hood, it actually creates a prompt for that, and it creates a special prompt using a user message. So now that we know about different roles like user and system, that kind of might make a little more sense. We'll dive into that as well. You'll see at the end of this, that creates a generation. From there, you can return the output and the content to get a string back. So we're going to use this one. We're going to pass in a prompt, and we're going to see how we can get the string back. So we're going to say return chat client.call, and now we need to create a prompt. So we're going to say new prompt, and then the contents is just going to be the string message. So tell me a dad joke, right? So that is going to, again, return not a string. So what we need to do is we need to get the result, we need to get the output, and we need to get the content, and that will return a string. So this is just a little bit more the next level of just passing in a string. So if we go ahead and run our application, oh, actually we have not done this. I thought we were continuing from the last one. So I am going to need to enter a couple of things in here. So spring.ai.openAI-API key. And I want to go ahead and set the model that I'm working with. So I'll say OpenAI chat.options.model. We'll say we're working with GPT-4. Now I don't want to just paste in my key here, so I'm going to go ahead and say open. I think I had this as OpenAI API key. Okay, and with that in place, I can go ahead and run my example. Hopefully everything works. It looks like it started, so I can head over to a terminal, and I'm just going to use a command line program called HTTP-IE, curl for us humans, and I'm going to curl /8080, and if everything works, we should call it to OpenAI and get a dad joke. Why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything. So we have a joke there that worked fine. Now that is not the interesting bits. I just wanted to kind of next level use that chat client.call that takes in a prompt. So now that we understand what that prompt is, and actually if we go back to it, I just want to take a look at this class. We looked at it in the slides, but if we're here, let's go ahead and look at it. Again, it takes in a string, which creates a user message. So this is the role of user message that we're sending to the AI. You can pass in message directly. You can pass in a list of messages. There are also other constructors here as well. So we'll go ahead and take a look at some examples of those. All right, in this next example, I'm going to create a new class called YouTube. And again, this is going to be a REST controller. And inside of this REST controller, we are going to have a get mapping of /popular let's just call this YouTube. So let's do this. Let's set a request mapping here of /YouTube, and this will be popular. All right, so I'm going to create a new method here that is going to return a string. We'll call this find popular YouTubers by genre. So we have by genre. We're going to take in a request parameter, and this request parameter is going to be genre. So we'll say genre, and we'll assign this to string genre. And I just also want to set a default value in case we don't get one. We'll say by tech. So we want some tech YouTubers, and then we can go ahead and create our message. So I'm going to go ahead and paste in this message just so we don't have to watch me type it. This is the one we saw in the slides before. So I have a message here. List 10 of the most popular YouTubers in genre, along with their current subscriber counts. If you don't know the answer, just say, I don't know. This is good. We're instructing the AI to not hallucinate. Don't make something up. If you don't have an answer, just let us know. So now we can create a prompt template from this so that we can basically replace this with the actual genre. So to do that, we're going to use prompt template. So prompt template, we'll call this prompt template, and we can say new prompt template, and we can pass in our message. From there, I can create a new prompt template. I can say create. And what I'm going to do here is I'm basically, let me just get a var of that. Yes, that looks good. I'm going to create a map, and I'm going to supply key value pairs. I'm going to say, hey, for genre, I want you to replace it with genre that I'm getting as an argument to this method. So now we've replaced that in the string template, if you will, and now we have a prompt. So now with a prompt, we can call our chat client. So we've already seen this at, oh, we don't have one yet. We need one of those, Dan. So let's do that again. Private final chat client. We'll get this through constructor injection. And now we can go ahead and use this. So we can say chat client.call. We've already seen how to pass a prompt. So we're going to pass in that prompt we just created. And just as we did before, we want to return a string. So we'll say get result, get output, and just get me the content, because that's all I care about in this case. Now, when we start working in real applications, we're probably going to want to parse this output into an object, and that's where output parsing comes in, which we will cover in a future video. So now that I have this, now I should be able to restart my application. We're going to hit the endpoint /YouTube/popular. It's going to have a default genre of tech. So let's say 8080/YouTube/popular. And let's see if we didn't screw anything up. We should get a list back. This will give us 10 of the most popular YouTubers in the tech space, along with their subscriber counts. Now, remember, this is up to a certain point, right? So these aren't going to be entirely accurate because the LLMs training data goes up to, in this case, September of 2021. So you see, I'm sorry I can't provide real-time data. My abilities are based on pre-existing data up to October of 2021. So here are some popular YouTubers in the tech space along with their subscriber counts. So that is really cool. Now, again, this is a list of strings. At some point, we might want to turn this into an object. Like maybe we have a record that includes the YouTuber's name and their subscriber count as fields. So we'll get into that in a later episode. But this is a really good start. And I want to take a look at one more kind of example of this. And we'll go back to the idea of jokes. I want to create a new class here. I'm going to call this the dad joke controller. And I want to say this is a REST controller. And what we are doing here, we'll need one more of those chat clients. So I'll say chat client, again, through constructor injection. And I'll have a get mapping of /dad jokes, right? So again, we want to get a string from this. We'll say string jokes. And in here, we're going to do a little bit something different. The first thing I'm going to do is create a user message. So we've been creating just a string message. I can say var user is equal to new user message. Let's see, tell me a joke about cats. And now that we have that, we can create a new prompt from that. So we'll pass in our user message. That will give us back a prompt. And we know that we can say return chatclient.call. We pass in our prompt and we get the result, we get the output, and we get the content. So let's go ahead and save that, rerun this application. And let's go back over to the terminal. And we're going to run that again. And why don't cats play poker in the jungle? Because there's too many cheetahs. Ah, ha, ha, I like that one. That's a good one. But not very specific to being a dad joke, right? Or at least in this context. So what I want to do is add a new system message to basically instruct the AI that this is the type of application that you are. So I can say, system is equal to new system message. And I can say your primary function is to tell dad jokes, right? If someone asks you for any other type of joke, please tell them you only know dad jokes, right? So now we have this system message and this user message. So remember, if we look back at prompt, one of the things that I can take is a list of messages. So instead of just sending in a user now, we can say list.of. I want you to pass in, let's just say system and user, right? So now what I want to tell my user message to do is tell me a serious joke about the universe. All right, so let's go ahead and try and rerun that application. Oh, messed up somewhere. Okay, rerun that. Looks like that worked. Let's go ahead and rerun this. And it says, I'm sorry, I can only share dad jokes. Here's one related to the universe. Why didn't the sun go to college? Because it already had 1,000,000 degrees. Ha, that is really good. And that is a dad joke. So I like that we can kind of instruct the system of what we're actually working with here. Instead of letting the user kind of run wild and just input anything, we are saying this is specifically what this system is meant to do. Cool, so that was a nice example. I got one more for you. I'm gonna go back to our YouTube example. And one thing that we did here is we kind of hard coded this string in here, right? But what if we wanted this in many places? We wouldn't wanna have to repeat ourselves. So let's go into resources, and I'm going to create a folder, let's say a new directory called prompts. And inside of prompts, I am going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this one youtube.st for string template. You'll see IntelliJ picks this up. I have an extension for this. Again, this is something the overall AI community uses. So you can go out and find prompt templates like this and share them, and then go ahead and just bring these into your applications. So I have that same one with the same placeholder for genre, but this time I'm not going to include that right here. So I'll go ahead and get rid of this. And now I can kind of externalize this, right? I want to go ahead and pull this from that file. So I can say private resource, YouTube prompt resource, and we can go ahead and ask for this. So, oops. So I'm going to say that we are going to get this using the @value annotation, and we are going to say this is coming from the class path under prompts and youtube.st. So with that dot there, now we need this message. We can just go ahead and pass this in. So YouTube prompt resource. And now this one should work exactly the same. I'm just going to run it, make sure it runs. It will work exactly the same. So I hope you found that valuable. We took a look at what prompts are, why they're important to AI applications, some resources for really kind of honing this craft, which is developing all these different types of prompts. We have user prompts and system prompts and assistant prompts. These are different roles that we can pass to the AI to really refine what we want to get from the output. And as I said, the next kind of piece of this puzzle is really taking what we get and not just using a string, but we saw in the YouTube example, we probably get 10 lists back of the popular YouTubers. We want to turn that into an object we can actually work with. So in the next one, we will work with the output parsers. So hey, I hope you found value in this, friends. If you did, do me a big favor, leave me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and as always, happy coding.